an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood, episode 25, Doorway of Darkness. In this episode, we find out that this weird portal in Gluttony's belly is a failed portal of truth. It's a portal of lies. It's a portal of, see, what had happened was, it's a portal of, let me explain. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. As usual, Max, how you doing? Haven't heard from you in a minute. Hope you're well. So, this episode, y'all, is mostly spent inside Gluttony's belly portal. His bortle. It sounds way too close to butthole. But honestly, that's not a terrible kind of association, because they keep talking about how there has to be an exit. And I mean, there probably is. I'm just saying. It's not going to be pretty, but it'll get you out. We'll see. Envy is pretty sure that there is no way out, and I can't tell how much Envy gives a shit about telling the truth. I don't think they care a whole lot, so I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. But there's also the possibility Envy has never been in here before and does not know. And it's just doing the thing that so many people do, which is saying things that they think like that's the truth. Also guilty of this, I will admit. So, this episode begins with Ed wandering around, being like, where the fuck am I? What is going on? And he starts to yell about how this is Ling's fault. And just as he's yelling this, all of a sudden, here's Ling. And Ling is like, yo, what the fuck? Why are you gonna blame me for this? This is not on me. Why are you even doing that? And he starts to be really relieved. Ed at first is like, oh, thank God. And then he stops and is like, how do I know you're not Envy? And I really do appreciate that paranoia. We need more of that from everybody, honestly. More paranoia, please. And Ling says, do you want me to recite you the entire room service bill? Which proves who he is. And then he says, how do I know you're who you say you are, you little runt? And Ed flips shit, and therefore Ling is like, and now I know who you are. And it's a pretty good system. I'm kind of curious, Candace, you know me well. If I were to say something to you to prove that I am me and not Envy, what would be the thing that I would say to you? Just out of curiosity. So, yeah, they're looking around and realizing, I have got to be inside this man's stomach, this homunculus' stomach. But I don't understand how this can be. And also, there's just a foot of blood that we're having to wade through. And there's no food. And there's no rest. And this sucks. And it really does suck. I mean, first of all, I cannot imagine the stench. I am sure it smells very bad. And they're sort of wondering, at first, when they're trying to determine whether or not they're actually in his stomach, they look around and they find different parts from the fight that they were just in. So there's a piece of the house that he blew up. There's all the fire, which they think is from Colonel Mustard, which is a pretty good call, actually. It didn't really occur to me to stop and be like, why is there fire in his belly? Got a fire in my belly. I need it. But no, seriously, I was didn't even think of it. And the fact that there's an actual explanation for it, I like. I wouldn't have been like mad about it as a stylistic thing if it was just like, oh no, it's just like, hell. So there's fire, I guess. I really wouldn't have been that mad about it. It would have been fine. But there's being an explanation is nice. Candace says red velvet cake is trash. That's what I'd believe. That is so funny because I literally just had that conversation with Miles yesterday. He admitted that he likes it because I was talking about that status that I share every year. One year, guys, I posted a status on Facebook. Red velvet cake is trash, and if you like it, you're a mark, a chump, and a sucker. And I posted this like 5 years ago, and I have shared it every year when it comes up because I still believe it. Erica says, I love how they immediately went full Looney Tunes, just boiling a shoe to eat. Also, I doubt leather is actually edible because of chemicals used in tanning, but that's beside the point. Erica, I was also wondering this. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, maybe the kinds of tanning that you would do before the Industrial Revolution, it would still be edible. I think that they do use lye, which I'm pretty sure is bad for you, but also if you've got no other food, it might like keep you alive long enough. I truly don't really know what the principles are behind certain kinds of desperation eating, and I'm really glad that I don't. I appreciate that God gave me a little bit of a break on that front. So then the looking around, they reveal the lieutenant's car. Truly. That one for me, I was just like, oh man, the car, like that sucks. And he's like, how can this possibly be his belly? It is so huge. And, my initial thing had, before I decided that it was probably the portal thing, which it does turn out to be, was like, did they just shrink? Is this just like, are they just very small? And they find Al's hand. And Ed decides correctly that if it's only his hand, that means that it got cut off and Al is probably safe. And he says, I wish there was some way I could contact him. And then he holds the hand up and he waves it around. And he just says, conveniently awakened telepathic powers. Okay. I am not going to put money on this, but my instinct is that was a dig at something specific, and I don't know what that is, or if it's just like, because it felt like I'm mocking another property that did this thing. And maybe you guys are expecting me to also do that very lazy thing. I'm not doing that. That's what it sort of felt like for me. And I don't know if that's anything, but there was something about it that seemed a little pointed, So if I'm wrong, that's totally fine. But I definitely read it and was like, ooh, what's that about? And by read it, I just mean the subtitle. I am watching the dubbed version, but I leave subtitles on sometimes out of laziness. I will admit it. So that cracked me the fuck up. But it is such a thing. When somebody just all of a sudden manifests the exact power that they need at the exact moment that they need it. I have no problem with this being an occasional thing. But there are some properties, and you know who you are, where a person has no inkling that they can do a particular thing. And then all of a sudden everybody's life is on the line and they're like, oh, look, I could do it. I could do it perfectly. I'm amazing. And Ling just walks away as he's waving it around. Come in, brother, come in. He's fucking trying to tune a radio. It's good stuff. So yeah, they're wandering around. They're finding all of this stuff that has been eaten, and it's all different time periods, evidently. And Ed is certain that they are going to find a way out. But there's nothing pointing toward there being an actual exit. So Ed does something pretty interesting here. He uses his alchemy to pull up a Mario-style pipe from the ground and drops his torch into it to see how long it is before it hits the bottom. And they never hear anything. Nothing. There's no bottom that they can find. So then they're like, well, there has to be a wall. There has to be an edge to this place. No matter how huge it is, we'll reach the edge. They are really running. They can't find an edge. Not happening. So then we cut back to the outside world. And remind me what the name of the little girl from Xing is, guys. She is super sad because she cannot find her little panda friend. Mei Chang, that's it. And she's talking with the fucking shitty, weird alchemist who looks like a rat. And he says something about how maybe her panda got eaten by a stray dog or something. And she starts crying so hard that she puts out their fire, which is really a trick. And he then says, I was just joking. And no, you weren't. 1, no, you weren't. And 2, fuck you. So then he starts to rebuild the fire and they have a conversation. And she says that she's a regular panda, but when she was little, she had a disease that kept her from growing all the way. And I found her after her mother abandoned her. And since then, she's been like a sister to me. And we get to see this precious little moment of her finding the panda in the rain and it being super adorable. And this little girl in her pigtails with her umbrella is just like, oh my gosh. And she comes over and holds her finger out and we see the panda's mouth open with its fucking teeth and just clamp onto her. It truly, I loved that. I really just like the fact that Xiaomei was the same with her. And she just had a lot of patience. You know, this kind of reminds me of my cat Aria, who's really Owen's cat. And she's like the biggest bitch I've ever met. Like, other than Brendan's mother's cat, who truly, I think, was like unwell. But Aria loves Owen. When she hears the car pull in, she runs to the door and sits up on her hind legs trying to see out the screen door and meows and like walks back and forth waiting for him to come in. As soon as he comes in, she just like starts to go up against his legs because he usually picks her up first thing, and so she wants to be picked up. When he puts her down, she rolls onto her back and like wants to play. She is so cute with him. But she's a cunt. And she will go into cunt mode with him also, as much as she loves him, and will just sink her teeth into him for no reason. And does not like anybody other than me. And like, no, actually, I think that's it. I think it's just us two. And I just appreciate the fact that, you know, if Owen steps wrong, she'll do the same thing. She's very consistent in her way. But we see fucking Xiaomei in this little nest with a blanket draped over her, falling asleep. And then the two of them, like, are training together. They're, like, fighting. What? They're both carrying big packs of, like, straw or something up the side of a mountain. They're eating with chopsticks together. Guys, I know that this is so silly, but honestly, this little panda eating a bowl of rice with a little pair of chopsticks is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. Ever. I want a little animal that'll eat out of a little tiny bowl with his little tiny chopsticks. That's all I want. I'm just saying. So, yeah, she's talking about this, and I don't think I could have gone through everything I have without Xiaomei by my side. And Mei Chang, it's sort of interesting because she says how her family is really low ranking and they don't have any power. And in the flashbacks, she's like, she doesn't have an actual umbrella. She has a giant leaf that she's holding by the stem, which is a real thing. In Guatemala, there were these like giant banana leaves that we used instead of umbrellas in this area because there was not a place to go buy an umbrella. And it's very effective. You know, they're waterproof. They're extremely big. And yet, seeing her here in the present, she has a much more elaborate gown. Her hair is much more elaborately dressed as well. She's got like multiple braids and buns and bangs and everything. And I'm just like wondering, because if we hadn't seen the actual flashback, I would probably wonder if she was lying. But because we saw them, I have to assume that she's telling the truth. And either there was a major change in circumstance, or she just like sort of changed the way that she looks for the journey, maybe? I don't know. But I just couldn't help but note. Or maybe it's supposed to be like, she's older now and she wears her hair like this because she's older, but she doesn't really look that much older. So I don't know, because it's like, that's a thing with anime where you can't judge people's ages by the animation, because there'll be somebody who looks like they're 1,000 years old and you'll find out that they're like 55, and you'll find somebody who looks like they're 12 and they're supposed to be 26. Like, who can tell? And she talks about like coming across the desert, and Yoki is like, yeah, why did you do that? Just for this like weird promise of immortality. That isn't real. You have to know that. And she says, because it's the last hope that my clan has. If I don't return with a method for attaining immortality and present it to the emperor, it's almost certain my clan will perish. That's why I risked my life with Xiaomei. And then she starts crying again, and he has to yank the fire out of the way. I am really curious about, like, he doesn't ask any further questions, I suppose, because he's a little bit too busy saving the fire. But if somebody said to you, if I don't find immortality to give to the emperor, my entire clan will perish, you would ask some follow-up questions to that, wouldn't you? Because that's a big statement, and I don't really know what's going on there. Is he holding her family hostage until she figures this out? We have the whole thing from Ling where he's talking about how he's the emperor's son, and he's finding it to get himself put to the front of the succession line. Is that true? Like, I had assumed, and maybe this is racist of me, with them both being from Xing and them both apparently looking for immortality, that they were from the same family and that they were both like in the same situation, perhaps competing against one another or perhaps in league with one another. But it doesn't seem like they're connected, and it could just be, again, that somebody's lying. But it is... what a weird thing to just be like, oh yeah, if I just do this one thing, my whole clan will be totally fine. If not, they will be annihilated. What do you mean? So yeah, this whole, just like, oh, that is a weird fucking statement. Like I said, nobody follows it up. I love to, he picks up the fire to get it out of the way. It burns his hands. He drops it on his own head. Yoki, how are you an alchemist, bruh? Literally. What are you doing? Like, he sucks at this. So throughout all of this, Scar is hiding in this like little corner listening to the conversation. Scar, can you stop being such a fucking freak? Can you not be a creep for like a second? Just go and partake in the conversation. Later on, she says something about how like, he told me what happened in Ishval. And Scar straight up walks away. Doesn't say a word to her. Walks away. That is so rude. She's a child. Sir, what? Get a hold of yourself. Can you imagine young Scar, seeing him behave this way to like a fucking infant, he would be disgusted. Scar, honestly, go to therapy. Do everybody a favor. Get out of town and get a therapist and just leave everybody in peace and figure your shit out, sir. You need some time to yourself. It's fine. So let's see. Beam Moore says it's a common-ish trope with some vague historical precedent where a ruler has many wives that all belong to different clans. The children belong to clans, and there's jockeying for inheritance and power between all the half-siblings and clans. Okay. Zijegi says, Yoki isn't an alchemist. He's a normal soldier. Erica says he's not a normal soldier, actually. He's much worse. Ruined my own joke by typing that. It's okay, Erica. It still works. Okay, I thought that he was an alchemist because he, like, was mad about Ed. And there was a vibe that he went up against Ed in a fight, which I had assumed was like an alchemist versus alchemist fight. Because they cut that scene, I have no context for that. So I've been assuming that he is like an actual alchemist this whole time. I don't think anybody ever actually corrected me, because I was asking in the scene where Scar joins up with him why Scar doesn't kill him when he is a state alchemist. And nobody said, well, he's not actually. So I don't know if that's because y'all were thinking that was a spoiler or what, but I remain surprised that nobody just like chimed in and was like, that's not actually correct. Because I was genuinely really puzzled by that. Scar's decision to not kill this guy. I was like, why wouldn't he? So Scar says, the sun isn't quite up yet. We are going to patrol the streets. And Mei Chang is like, oh, he's helping me to find her? Is that what it is? And this is when Yoki is like, I think it's because he's lost a bunch of people, so he knows how you feel. So yeah, he does not answer her when she tries to relate to him on this. And I suppose one could say, well, actions speak louder than words. He may not answer her, but he is putting in the time to try and help her track down her friend. But you could just like be like, yeah, it was hard. She's just like, that's it. That's it. So we cut back to Ed and Ling. And they are really beginning to fade here. Ed has tied Al's arm to his back, which I find sort of precious. And then they're talking about like getting room service and how they're hungry. And Ling collapses. And Ed is pretty hard on him and is just like, are you that fucking pitiful? Get the fuck up off your ass, you fucking weakling. This is pathetic. It's bad enough when you just collapse in the street for no goddamn reason. We cannot be doing this right now. You know what? Go ahead and give up and die. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna fucking keep going. So fuck you. He is so mad. And then like keeps walking. I'm leaving you here. I'm not messing around. I'm leaving. I'm really doing it. And of course, sure enough, we cut and he has the torch in his teeth and he is lifting Ling up over his shoulder. And Ling's like, you said you were going to leave me behind. You should have just left me. And Ed's like, nah, people need you, man. There are people waiting for you. So shut the fuck up. And as they're walking, he like turns and looks over his shoulder and trips and falls on a rock. And they are all of a sudden in like this circle of, I think it's supposed to be like there was a monument here or something. It's the first like non-blood soaked area for a moment. They have big rocks around them a lot of the time that they can sort of climb up on. But this is the sort of like flat area that they have found that hasn't got a foot of blood over it. And I was really surprised here because I thought that this was going to be significant. I thought that this big round open area with no blood, that they were both going to be like, oh shit, we found something. No, this just seems to be another like fucking thing that he swallowed. And it's nothing. I really thought this was going to be something. They build a fire and he cooks his boots. And Ling says something about like, do you have athlete's foot? And he holds his foot up and he says, it's made out of metal, you idiot. So I get, and he made the pot and the bowls and the spoon and everything with alchemy, which is a pretty handy skill. I really like the idea of alchemy being used in that extremely practical way where it's just like, oh, we need a pot real quick. And you can just make one out of the ground. I love it. Can you imagine any time that you need a thing and you're just not at home, you can just like touch something made out of the same stuff and just be like, oh, no, here it is. Close enough. That is bonkers. So, you know what? Ed says, B. Moore says, I just thought Ed made a raised dais with alchemy just to have somewhere to lie down. That didn't occur to me. And maybe that is what happened. It doesn't have even any blood on it anywhere, which I would imagine if it came up out of the ground, it would have to. But also, like, it's a fucking cartoon, so probably it wouldn't have to. It could just do whatever you want with it. But, all right, I like that. So Ling says, it's my fault you're here. And starts to blame Ed at this point. And Ed is like, look, first of all, no, it's not. And second of all, this place isn't even that bad compared to some of the things that my teacher has put me through. So really the worst part is we just don't know where we are. So we don't know a way out. But there is a way out. We're gonna do it. And he just says that he's really stubborn. And if I were to give up, Al would be really fucking pissed at me. Now, guys, this is not a thing that actually matters. And I just want to put it out there as that I'm not doing this as like a criticism. But all of them are in blood, up to their knees, waiting around. But anytime that they're not actually in it, their clothes go back to being perfectly clean again. Probably because drawing them as blood covered is an awful lot of gore in a different sense than it is when it's just like part of the atmosphere of the room. And it would probably be like a little bit difficult to make them out against the background a lot of the time. But I just want to stop and think about if this were live action and how much of a complete mess this would be to film if you were going to do practical effects. I mean, it would be a nightmare. And I just kept thinking about like, you know, them stopping to take a rest here and cook this boot. And I don't know where they get the water to boil it in. I guess that's also alchemy. Like we only see Ed use like metal and stone a lot of the time, but apparently you can use alchemy to direct other elements. It's just that people kind of have their specialities. But if you just think about how disgusting you would be after wading through all this blood, and then you have to like stop and eat a boot that has been submerged fully in that blood. Like, ew, just everything. Like every time I start to really think about how this would go, you'd have to do it CGI or else it would be a fortune. And it keeps making me think of like Evil Dead, because you know how much like it was some kind of record, the number of gallons of fake blood that got used on that set. But yeah, it is hideous. And I am somebody who gets very like, I think it's like a sensory thing. When my clothes are wet on my body, it freaks me out a little bit. I hate it. Like wet bathing suits even. It's the worst. And I can't imagine it being, not only is it wet, but it's got that like sticky quality that blood has. And then as it dries, it would get hard, because you know how that's how it works with blood. It like leaves that coating or soaks into the, and whatever. You just, so gross. So gross. I'm sorry to take it there. I just needed everybody to stop and really think about, practically speaking, what this would really be like and how fucking horrifying it would be. Just in a purely physical sense, leaving out where did this blood come from, and the whole like, you know, idea behind all of the lives lost and how macabre it all is. Just practically speaking, it's horrifying and I hate it. So anyway, at this point, here comes Envy. I for some reason kind of expected Envy to not be trapped in here the same way that they are. I assumed that Envy, being a homunculus themselves, would just kind of like skirt the rules, or maybe their body wouldn't like be compatible somehow, or the philosopher's stone that fuels them, which is what I'm assuming is happening, that Envy's body is powered like Lust's was with a philosopher's stone. I may be wrong about that, but I was thinking that that would somehow keep them from winding up in this place as well. Not so. Envy is apparently, from what we see, is locked in here along with the two of them. And Ling is immediately like, oh, I'm going to fight you. And Ed is like, hey, bud, why don't you show me where the door is? And I love Ling. It's just like, you're just going to start begging? And Ed is like, if it takes being their best friend, I'll do it. Whatever. I just want to get the fuck out of here. This is when Envy says there is no exit. You've gotten us into a fine mess. I can't believe you got me swallowed with you. So this is when they get their confirmation that they are in fact in his stomach, but it's not actually his stomach. And Envy explains about how their father tried to make a portal of truth. And the portal that wound up being created is a fuck up. It is not, he did not succeed. He made something, but it's not actually what he was trying to make. And I'm really curious about the fact that there is like an eye involved in both of them, and just like wondering if there's any particular significance to that, or if it's just the fun of the imagery, you know? And the creator was just like, oh, no, I like that. We'll have that be like a recurring theme. But yeah, he's a failed experiment. And she says, despite how powerful our father is, he still couldn't create one. We're trapped inside a defective portal of truth. This place exists somewhere between reality and truth. And I can assure you, there is no way out of here. The only option we've got is to sit here until our strength runs out, and that's it. And then the camera pulls back on this like tiny little pool of light that they've got going on in this area. And just, the line is, all we can do is wait here to die. And for a moment, Ed is like truly despondent for like, I would say probably 2 seconds. And then immediately goes, no, I don't buy it. All right, Envy, you're full of shit. I know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work. I'm not falling for this crap. And for a second, I really thought he was like absolutely like, I thought that this sort of show of bravado was real. And that Ed was like, oh, you almost had me. But I fucking am done with your tricks. That kind of moment. Instead, he says all of this, I'm not falling for it. And then immediately kind of falls back and goes, oh my God, Ed's going to grow up without a brother and he's going to be so upset. I said I would save him. What are we going to do? And it really, like, he seems to be calling Envy out, but then it looks like believes Envy after all. We shall see. But the Fuhrer Bradley comes up at this point and asks, is Fuhrer Bradley the one who came up with all of this? Is he the one in charge, essentially? And Envy says, what, are you serious? No, he's a homunculus. He's not fucking Dad. And I had forgotten that there was really no absolute confirmation about the fact that he was a homunculus to Ed. I just kind of assumed that Ed was like taking Ling at his word and was just like, oh, I guess the guy's a fucking homunculus. I guess that makes as much sense as anything. But he kind of starts back, and it's clear that there was a part of him that was like hoping that wasn't actually going to be the truth. So Ed says the fifth laboratory, human lives sacrificed to make philosopher's stones, homunculi. And if the Fuhrer is on your side, then I'm guessing you were the ones behind Ishval. And then Envy is a monster. And I mean, like, Envy is a monster before Envy actually physically turns into a monster. And Envy talks about how Ishval was their favorite job. And that indeed a soldier killing a child was what started everything. And they were the one who pulled the trigger. And they had such a great time. It was such a rush to completely throw these countries into war with the pulling of one trigger. Dude who Envy picked to impersonate to do the job was somebody who had been like notoriously moderate and didn't want the war to begin with. And he got court-martialed as a result of there being absolutely no explanation for what had happened. This is just brutal. Like, the thing that I think is so interesting here is that Envy feels so much more like a person in a lot of ways, despite we know none of them or their ilk are. I feel like I've gotten to know Envy well enough that I sort of thought maybe Envy had, definitely don't want to say a soft side because that's not it. I sort of wondered if Envy was going to turn out to have like maybe a streak of anger about what they've been asked to do. Because it's unclear to me, based on greed, it's not impossible for the homunculi to just decide to do a different thing. You know, they have an assignment they've been given, evidently, but they can sort of be like, nah, and do something else. And I was wondering if there was any feeling that Envy had of this whole thing that I've been assigned. I'm doing it because I've been told, but I don't really want to, especially considering the relationship between Envy and greed. There was almost a sense that Envy was envious of greed going off and doing his own thing. And maybe Envy would have liked to do the same thing, but maybe didn't have the same strength of character, or maybe they just weren't stupid enough considering what winds up happening to greed. But I was looking for a sliver of discontent to exploit and maybe sort of get Envy to just kind of fuck their responsibilities up a little bit. And this moment of finding out that Envy was not only instrumental in starting the war, but looks back on it as one of their fondest memories ever, is so upsetting in so many ways. It's just a really scary, like, they say, what a rush, like I said. And Envy just delights constantly in how easy human beings are to manipulate, that this one trigger pull caused a cascade of incidents among them all. I ravaged their entire country. It was invigorating. The best part, the officer that I pretended to be, and then this is when they talk about like the occupation and how he had been opposed to it. And as Envy is saying this, they're grinning from ear to ear. It is truly giving them life, this moment. They are delighted to tell the story because they're proud of everything that they have done. And Ed is like, so you killed a fucking innocent child. You destroyed my hometown. You drove out the Ishvalans. And you turned Scar into a murderer. So you're the reason that Winry's parents are dead. And this pretty much sends Ed into a full-on rage. And he picks a fight. I say picks a fight. There's a really, really reasonable reason for a fight here. And this is when Envy is like, oh, okay, so it's like that. And Envy turns into their actual real form. Okay. Envy's actual form is so much worse than anything I could have thought up ever. Like, Envy is a nightmare. There is something about the combination of Envy's size, the fact that they have faces, multiple faces in so many areas of their body. Like, Envy's pupils are made up of like 5 different faces. There's a giant, like, the whole area around their shoulders and upper torso is covered in like heads and faces and mouths and whatnot. And one of the mouths of one of those faces is opening with other faces coming out of that mouth. There's even parts where it's almost like there's a full body growing, like arms and whatnot are coming out. And also, Envy is fucking giant. Like, we're talking city bus, maybe more like a tractor trailer. It is so much worse. I'm telling you guys, I knew that we hadn't seen Envy's real form, but like nothing like this had even entered my mind. And I'm really curious whether or not this is a result of a failed experiment that just made Envy look like a goddamn freak, or if Envy was intended to look like this, or what. And of course, it's kind of funny to me that, like, we always hear Envy be called the green-eyed monster. Envy is green. Like, the skin of this monster is green. But the eyes are not. And I am assuming that the green-eyed monster is just like an American thing. Envy's eyes are purple when the pupils decide to be regular pupils. It kind of goes back and forth from pupils to faces. On top of the fact that this is so scary already, Envy is like looking down at them, talking to them, laughing at their reaction to what they look like really. And there are big globs of faces and heads dripping off Envy's body like drops of water. Why is that the worst part? I really can't put my finger on what it is about that specifically, that there are like constant chunks of body parts falling off of Envy. But like, that part particularly, that really fucked me up. And at one point, Envy's like grinning at them and opens their mouth, and there's all these arms reaching down from like inside its mouth that are like tongue colored. I mean, this is just so wrong. It's so wrong. I hate it so much. This is the kind of thing where I'm kind of glad that this drawing for this has to be so intricate so that I know they won't do it that often, because it's probably like a lot to animate, you know? And oh my God, guys, this is not an easy thing to pull off. You know, there's a lot of monsters out there in media, and making one after you've seen so many that can really get under your skin gets harder and harder as people get older, as media improves and the ability to like animate certain things or use CGI improves. But man, they really knocked it out of the park with this one. I think I'm going to have dreams about this kind of thing, you know? So Ryan says, back when Grebe was captured and met Envy, he called them ugly and pissed them off, mentioning what they really look like. Yeah, I was thinking that. I mean, I've been thinking that actually, because him saying that kind of lodged in my brain. And I just kept being like, man, I wonder what Envy really looks like. And I just assumed that Envy was still going to be humanoid, but look like really ugly in some particular way that was like bordering on grotesque or perhaps actually grotesque, to sort of give a human edge to the Envy itself. Like, oh yeah, you came out looking like that. And so of course you're envious and turning into other people because you don't look right. But this is so extreme that it's almost like, if I looked like that, would I be envious of other people? Because like, that is just not even in the same universe, never mind ballpark. And I mean, I guess it's like just easier to be able to look like a person, to walk around and do the things. So it's part of the functionality of the package that Envy can change the way that they look. But that kind of like bonkers power that you get from being that size, and all of these different people are literally dripping off you. I mean, it's just like that kind of mindset I can't even put myself in at all. But yeah, this is just ridiculous. And I love that Ling and Ed are essentially talking as they are about to go up against Envy. They're talking about how they just don't stand a chance right now. And Ed uses the metal, the iron in the blood, to create a weapon for Ling. Guys, he makes this fucking like kukri scythe sort of thing. And Ling says something about how Ed has really bad taste. And I howled. I loved that so much. Just being like, really, dude? This is so fucking ugly. Are you serious? All right. I mean, it's a knife. I guess I'll use it. But Jesus. And Ed says something like, I don't know, I think it looks pretty sharp. Okay, Dad, calm down. So they are both like talking about the fact that they've got ribs broken and blah, blah, blah. And they're just going to go ahead and do it. Even though they think that they are destined to lose, they're going to go for this fight anyway. And we have two other small moments. The really, really small one. Al is sitting across from Gluttony, and Gluttony has really calmed down. Apparently, accidentally eating Envy has sobered him up a little bit. And it's clear that he's kind of having a feeling of like, I would like to undo what I did, but I don't really even know what I did. I don't know what happens when I swallow people. So, and Gluttony is really afraid of Father being mad at him. So he's sort of avoiding, like taking any action because he doesn't know what to do. Al is really upset because as far as Al knows, Ed is gone and dead, which there's no reason to not think that. I would think that for sure. And Al finally is like, okay, you just mentioned Father being mad at you. Let's go see him. Let's go see him and figure this out. And Gluttony is like, well, you are supposed to be a sacrifice. He'd probably be okay with that. And Al's like, yeah, see, he would want to meet me. This is perfect. Take me to him. And Gluttony's like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. And then they start to head towards the city. And it's so funny because Al has this moment of like, are you sure we're heading in the right direction? And Gluttony's like, mm-hmm. And he looks up and is like, but that means he lives in Central. And it's always so funny to me when there's like these moments of like, can you believe it? Of course I believe it. Of course I know that he's in Central. Everything happens in this one city. That's just how it works. It's fine. But it just really felt like they were trying to do like a dun-dun kind of moment. Like the way that they were like, did you know that the one ingredient in a philosopher's stone is a human soul? Well, yeah, I fucking figured. Okay, it's fine. You don't have to make a big thing out of this because it's pretty obvious that's how it's going to roll. And Father being in Central, all of the homunculi are around all the time. I think it's pretty safe to assume their dad's there too. I mean, just saying. So that's what's going on with Al and Gluttony. Then we have got what's going on with the Fuhrer and Hawkeye and Colonel Mustard and everybody. Everybody is getting reassigned. I had assumed, of course, that Hawkeye would be put somewhere far away from the action. Not so. Hawkeye is going to be made the Fuhrer's new personal assistant, which I found it really fucked up that the Fuhrer sends his own personal assistant to tell Hawkeye that she's going to be the new personal assistant. Is that him firing his own personal assistant? Or does he just have like 7 personal assistants, perhaps? Maybe he's just got a lot of them. I don't know. But it felt like, sending somebody to tell a new person that they've been hired so that you can then draw them in and be like, thank you for hiring them. You're fired. And Roy is in a room with the Fuhrer and is like, why have you just not killed me? Like, you could just kill me and this would be all over. And the Fuhrer says, then how would you learn your lesson? If you were dead, what would you learn? Which for some reason felt very chilling. I didn't like that answer. I don't like it. It's just, there's all kinds of implications there. And then Mustard pushes him a little bit and says a couple of things like about how, well, you were at Hughes's funeral and when you were burying him, your hands were shaking. Like, was that not real? King Bradley says the most incredibly cold-blooded thing I've ever heard, which was, My hands were shaking with rage because his fucking kid would not shut up. Wow. That is amazing. That is like the best answer. That is so good. You thought my hands were trembling with emotion because I was so devastated at this loss. Nope. It turns out this grieving child was pissing me off because she was ill-behaved, and just how did her parents raise her? Really, that was a moment, y'all. And considering his name is fucking Wrath, like, maybe I should have seen that coming a little bit more, but I didn't. And it really, that line just hits hard. Good God. Man, that is so good. That is so good. That's like one of the more devastating responses to any question in anything I have ever covered. It's like a combination of you think you're going to get a soft spot from this person and you don't, which is always a tough thing. It's also you thought you knew what was happening here and that you were getting some insight, and you were so, so wrong. And it's like another moment of you keep thinking this person's a human being. You keep fucking falling for this little, like, charade they've got going. That's not a person. And you gotta remember it, because everything that you're trying to assign to them for their emotions, you're filtering through the lens of a person. And that won't work. And at one point, Roy was like, well, how would your kid feel at your funeral? How would you react? Obviously trying to be like, well, you have your own kid. Do you feel the same way? Trying to see. And fucking Wrath is like, look, that kid is not a weakness for me. He's fine. But I don't care. Like, not in any way that you could use him against me. It's not, he doesn't explicitly say that, but it feels pretty clear. And another moment of just, God, I keep thinking that this is going to be one of those things where, like, I was made to, pretend to be this guy's boyfriend in order to deceive so-and-so, and now I'm actually falling in love with him. You keep thinking, oh, well, maybe Bradley's grown, like, a little bit close to his fake wife and adopted child. Maybe he's beginning to take on the perspectives of a human being. When Pride was talking to him, perhaps, about, you've spent too much time with humans, maybe Pride was right, and this is the kind of thing they were, alluding to. Nope. Just really brutal. So yeah, and just all of this is so well done, and just keeps underlining how these things don't work the way you want them to work. The homunculi, if they had the same sort of weaknesses to exploit that we have, it would feel like you've got a psychological advantage somehow. But no, none of the things that we're used to mattering can be used the same way. And the fact that they can look so much like people is a really good weapon in that regard. Because you guys know what I'm talking about with, like, just, there's a moment in Community, for example, where Jeff picks up a pencil and he says, humans can relate to anything. That's why I can show you this pencil and tell you his name is Tim, and then do this, and he breaks it in half and says, and a tiny part of you dies. because humans relate to anything. And you guys know what I'm talking about, where there are like, we assign whole emotional roller coasters to the reactions that our pets have. Inanimate objects. There was a fucking TikTok I saw where a girl was pretending to be the mug at the back of the cabinet that you never use, that watches as you go and pick up all your other cooler mugs and use all of those, but never ever use them. And how like sad they get over it. And there were people in the comments just like, oh my God, I have to go get my like sad cheap mug and use it right away. That's with just totally inanimate objects. You make yourself look and sound like a person, and we are really gonna fucking think things, you know? There's just no avoiding it. It's like the same thing as how humans tend to see faces and stuff because we just assign, you know? I don't know. I love that. It's just so creepy. And the reminder between this and Envy just being like, oh my God, killing that kid was the best. Oh, that day was great. First, I got up and I picked my gun. And then I looked at the child in its face and I smiled at her. I smiled at her to get her to stand still. And she fucking did. Can you believe it? She just stood there and like watched me put the gun in her face. She just watched me do it. It was amazing. You will never get over this. Hold on. Let me tell you the next best part. It's just like, I keep thinking that they're kind of people a little bit. They are not. They're not. They're not. And I feel so bad for fucking Roy because he really thought that he was doing something here. He really was on a track and figured this was all just, it was just a matter of, I'll pull back the curtain, reveal your secret, and then everybody will rise up and be like, well, what the fuck? And Colonel Mustang is finding out the thing that all of us are beginning to realize. Some of us knew long ago, but for a lot of us, the past 10 years have been what's really revealing. Where you keep thinking, well, I'll just report this to the authorities. But what happens when the authorities are like, thank you for the report. We appreciate you letting us know that the system is functioning as intended. Have a nice day. Like, Colonel Mustang really thought, oh, I know. This thing is corrupted and we'll fix it. No. He says, Wrath says, it's been since day one. I don't know what to tell you, Home Slice, but you thought that we came in and took a thing over. No, we built it. This is ours. This is our thing. Your country? Thank you. And you're welcome. And I mean, is there a truer thing about the systems of the United States? I mean, this is a truly worldwide thing because of colonialism and colonization and white supremacy. But I always like to just bring it back to the United States because this country was built on the backs of indigenous people and slaves. And we just try to act like that was just like an unfortunate accident. And that's not really what it's about. Whatever, hand wave it. And it's like, no, that's the fucking core of it. That's the feature. That's how it began. This stuff is how it started. But we don't want to look at it. I'm sorry, I just looked in the chat. Candace says that's why those robot dogs are so scary, but they will shoot you. And Erica says it's like how people who repair Roombas say most people don't want a new one. They want the old one fixed because they get so attached. Erica, that is so understandable. I love that fact. I did not know that, but that's amazing. I have a robot vacuum that somebody gave me as a wedding gift. I think it was Yamaha. And I still haven't set it up, and I got to do it. But now I'm a little worried, Erica, because I'm going to get all attached to it. I probably should name it something. But anyway, yeah. So that's what's going on with Roy. It's just basically he is being shown how little power he actually has to affect anything here. And when he tries to say he could use, like, Wrath's son, Wrath is like, well, no, you can't. And I know you really like Hawkeye, and I'm going to make Hawkeye spend all her time right next to me, so that you are always aware, if I feel like it, I can take her out or torture her or do whatever so that you stay in line. Sucks to suck. I really do feel for him. Like, I don't like Colonel Mustard. Y'all know he's a pain in the ass. He's mostly on the side of right, but he's just kind of like accidentally successful a lot of the time. And in no small part to the fact that Hawkeye is actually competent. But the moment when you realize that the system you thought you were fighting against, you figure out that there isn't any alternative in place for you. That's a really tough moment. Figuring out that, like, going to people to help, you're actually outing yourself as somebody who cannot be trusted in their eyes. Ooh, don't like it. I feel for him. I really do. So, that is the end of the episode. I'm over time, so I have to go. But I appreciate you guys all so much for hanging out with me and for all of your comments. And I will be seeing you very soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.